Board of Directors regular meeting. Mr. Powell, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you please call the roll?
Mr. Hippel.
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here.
Mr. McGlennon.
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Here.
Ms. Sadler.
Here. Next on our agenda is public comment. Do we have any speaker cards this evening? I don't know where to look.
This is different.
I know, we're all confused. Everybody's in different places today. No speaker cards. Okay, next on our agenda is the consent calendar, which would include our minutes adoption. Do we have a motion to approve the?
So moved. Adoption of the consent calendar.
I think we can do a voice vote.
You can do this by voice vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Public hearings, we have one today, Easement Abandonment, area east of 7,000 Westbrook Drive, part of 6799 Richmond Road, Colonial Heritage. Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. AES Engineers has requested that the JCSA abandon a portion of our easement adjacent to our lift station and Colonial Heritage. Due to the creation of a new subdivision road there, a portion of the easement that we have is no longer necessary, as we will retain an easement in the new road for our infrastructure. Staff recommends approval of the resolution.
Okay. Are there any questions for staff before we open the public hearing?
I was just wondering, it says, is this Richmond Road at the bottom?
At the very bottom?
Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, I was trying to look, I wasn't sure. It says it's off Richmond Road. The map didn't give me great orientation as to where it was.
It's well off of Richmond Road.
Off, okay.
It's well off of Richmond Road, yes.
Gotcha.
Right.
Now, this is just taking the line you're seeing here and bringing it into the road.
That's correct, yes.
All right, any other questions? All right, well, we will open the public hearing. Do we have any speaker cards for this public hearing?
No, ma'am.
Seeing none, I guess we will close that public hearing. Look to the board then for a discussion or motion.
Move to approve the abandonment of the easement.
Mr. Powell?
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon? Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Next, we have board considerations. Contract award, replacement of Five Forks Water Treatment Plant, variable frequency drives, electric motor, and contracting company, Inc., $261,186.
Before you this afternoon is a resolution to award a contract in the amount of $261,186 for the replacement of 13 Toshiba variable frequency drives, also known as VFDs, at the Five Forks Water Treatment Plant. A VFD is a hardware and software package that controls our pumps and our motors in the wells. These VFDs are approaching the end of their useful life. And they are going to be replaced with Toshiba drives with the newer technology that are compatible with the existing equipment that we have. This contract is a sole source purchase, and the amount includes all labor, material, and equipment, and the CIP does include funds for this project. Staff recommends approval of the resolution authorizing the contract in the amount of $261,186.
Okay. Any questions? Comments? All right, I guess we will look for a vote.
Motion.
Motion
So
approved.
moved.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon? Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Second on board consideration, setting a public hearing, fiscal year 2020 utility rates. Mr. Powell.
This resolution establishes April 9th as your public hearing on the fiscal year 2020 JCSA budget. The proposed budget includes the recommendations of the rate study, including the incremental service revenue increases as well as fixed charge increases. The only other addition to that is the budget the budget recommendation will include an increase to the grinder pump maintenance fee from $300 to $325 to try to closer align the expenses of that program with the revenues. If the changes were approved, the monthly water and sewer bill for a typical 5,000 gallon a month residential user would increase by $3.10 a month, bringing the bill from $38.95 to $42.05. This would remain the lowest combined bill in the region with the exception of the city of Williamsburg.
Could you repeat that, please? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had one question. You mentioned the public hearing would be on the 9th.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we had approved our calendar to have the meetings for the JCSA on
We generally have. Generally have done that. We decided to keep the JCSA budget public hearing consistent with the Board of Supervisors public hearing as well. We may not want to do that in the future, but for this year, that was the plan to align both we're planning to align both the public hearing and the budget approval.
Okay, so let me, I don't have a copy of our JCSA calendar, but I wasn't, so we are doing our regular meeting for the JCSA, the fourth Tuesday, except for April, when we're going to do it the second.
Actually, in April, we'll just have 2 meetings.
Okay. Okay. So
One's
this
gonna
budget,
be public
that's what I was
hearing.
trying to get straight. This budget would be, and that's in accordance with our adopted calendar then?
I believe so,
Okay,
yes.
that's what I wanted to verify.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
And that would be made public on our website as well,
Correct,
correct?
yes.
Okay, all right,
So moved.
thank you.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan? Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye. Thank you. Next on our agenda is board requests and directives. Anyone? I just had one question. This cold weather, this lovely balmy weather we're having, are we having any issues with any of our infrastructure because of the weather?
We have not actually had any issues the last few days. Yes, thank you, Ms. Larson. Unfortunately, what we typically find is that the issues occur when things thaw out a little bit. So I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
But we actually have not had any for the last few
Very good.
days.
That's good to know. All right, thank you. And all of our staff are weathering everything okay out there? All right, they're all good and bundled up?
Yes.
That's just the grandma and me coming out, got to check on those things. All right, next on our list is the general manager's update.
Just a couple items. I wanted to note that I did participate in a podcast on how to prevent frozen pipes. I think it was been released in the last few days, so that's out there.
timing.
And then the only other update I had is I did want to let you know that the meter register replacement project, we're having a kickoff meeting here in a couple weeks. And I'll have more information as the project gets going in earnest, but that project should start up in April, and we're anticipating about a 6 or 7 month implementation process. So that's something that will be starting up in the next 3 months.
All right, thank you. I guess now we will look for a motion to adjourn until 4 p.m. We are on February 26th,
Correct,
correct?
yes.
Okay, for our regular meeting.
Motion?
Mr. Powell?
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower. And Ms. Sadler.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got my own hammer.
Got your own hammer?
Yes.
Stick around for a couple of days. It's on me.
Okay, you all set? I'll call to order this meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors for the purpose of a work session. Mr. Stevens, please call the roll.
Mr. Hippel.
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here.
Ms. Sadler.
Here.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Here. Okay, we have several public hearings and things that were postponed from the previous meeting, so we're going to start that under board discussions. Our first one is public hearing for SUP 180026, 6096 Centerville Road, Detached Accessory Apartment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
and members of the board. Mr. Antoine Anderson Jr. has submitted an application to construct a detached accessory apartment on 6096 Centerville Road. The property is zoned A1 General Agricultural and is designated low-density residential on the 2035 Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map. The property is currently vacant, and building permits for a single-family home and detached accessory apartment have been submitted for this proposal and are under review. The detached accessory structure is proposed to be 748 square feet, with the proposed apartment taking up 374 square feet of the structure. The other half of the structure will be used as a garage. The A1 General Agricultural Zoning District allows detached accessory apartments as a specially permitted use in accordance with 2432B of the James City County Code. Staff has reviewed the proposed design and finds that all requirements have been met. Staff finds this proposal to be compatible with the surrounding development and consistent with the 2035 Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Ordinance. Staff recommends that the Board of Supervisors approve this application subject to the proposed conditions, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is also available. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Okay. Planning Commissioner this evening with us is Mr. Heath Richardson. Is this the last of the duties?
I think so.
Okay, well, thank you. Welcome back to us.
Indeed,
and,
thank you.
Please give us a rundown.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. The Planning Commission voted in favor 7-0 to recommend approval of this application to you, and we deemed it non-controversial. Barring any questions? Thanks very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, do we have any, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Do we have any speakers?
No, sir.
No speakers for this one? Close the public hearing and look to the board for discussion.
I did have one question, Mr. Brook, if you would. I realize this is all about the accessory apartment and garage, but so might I understand that the house on the property is currently vacant, but the applicant is moving into the house?
There is no house on the property. The property is vacant. So they're proposing to build a house and the detached accessory apartment at the same time.
I got you. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That was clear to me. Okay.
That was the only question I was going to ask too. So.
Any other questions? Make a motion for approval?
Okay, we have a motion for approval. Mr. Stevens?
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Our next public hearing is SUP 180029, 7206 Merrimack Trail Rental of Rooms Renewal. Ms. Costello is going to give us the briefing, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Mr. and Mrs. Shelby and Patrick Dillon have applied to renew their special use permit to allow for the rental of up to 3 rooms in their home. The property is located inside the primary service area at 7206 Merrimack Trail, is zoned R2 General Residential, and is designated low-density residential by the 2035 Comprehensive Plan. The rental of rooms to a maximum of 3 rooms is a specially permitted use in the R2 zoning district. Staff notes that while both tourist home and rental of rooms describes types of short-term vacation rentals, the uses are distinct in 2 ways. The rental of rooms limits the number of rooms to a max of 3 rooms rented, whereas tourist home operators may rent the entire home on a short-term basis. Secondly, the rental of rooms has traditionally required that the operator or owner remain present and continue residing at the property during the time of rental, whereas the tourist home use does not have any residency requirements. The rental of rooms use prohibits the rental of the house as a whole. A special use permit was issued on March 14, 2017, with an expiration date of March 14, 2019. The time limit for the SUP was removed for this renewal. Staff considered the home's location, parking provisions, and screening all to be favorable factors in the evaluation of this application. All property lines are screened by existing and mature vegetation. The home is located at the end of a long driveway and provides adequate parking capacity for the proposed use. The proposed SUP conditions were designed to address and minimize potential impacts of adjacent properties by limiting the total number of guests and number of guest vehicles allowed on site, limiting the owner to 1 contract party per night, and ensuring that the applicant has acquired all necessary licenses. Staff is aware of the existence of a restrictive covenant that applies to the subject property, which may affect the rental of rooms on this property. The county attorney has advised that because the county is not a party to this restrictive covenant, staff lacks the legal authority to interpret whether or not the covenant prohibits the use. Staff finds the proposal to be compatible with the 2035 Comprehensive Plan, the zoning ordinance, and surrounding development. On December 5, 2018, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this application by a vote of 7-0. Staff recommends that the Board of Supervisors approve the application subject to the conditions listed in the resolution. At this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Costello. Any questions from the board for staff? Okay.
I'll just ask about the restrictive covenant. I assume that prohibits commercial activity in the neighborhood. Is that right? Or
I believe that's what it says.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have Mr. Richardson again from the Planning Commission.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, again, with the clarity for the issue of the restricted covenants, the Planning Commission voted 7-0 in favor of approval for your review. pending any further questions.
And you had no comment at the meeting from anyone objecting to
No, sir.
the proposal? And we haven't received any.
I was going to ask. Taking my question. What the heck?
Okay.
I do want to say, Mr. Richardson, really above and beyond for you to come back, and so thank you. I don't know that I would do that.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you. All right. We will open the public hearing. I have one card, and that's the Shelby Dillon, the applicant. Would you wish to speak to the board, please?
Good to see everyone again. It's been almost 2 years, and so here I am once again. The only thing new I have is 3 grandchildren under the age of 2. Yay, so we block off quite a bit of time for them to come back and visit. So the Airbnb, in essence, has done exactly what I had hoped it would accomplish. It keeps the house available for family and visits and not empty all year. There was a question asked about how many days that it was used. So in 17, it was about 122 days it was booked, and in 18, it was about 184, so it went up to about a 50% occupancy rate. Of course, that doesn't take into account the days I block off for personal use. So I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Dillon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. With no other public speakers, we'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the approval of the SUP. When Ms. Dillon was here a couple of years ago, we were in the middle of a discussion about short-term rentals and Airbnb and so forth, and that really hasn't been resolved. State legislature has been sort of taking their time in dealing with the issue as well, not necessarily a bad thing. But in this particular case, where the property faces onto one of our main commercial roads, where it is really separated from the rest of the neighborhood and surrounded by other commercial activities, it seems like an appropriate utilization of the property to allow the homeowner to generate some additional revenue to maintain the home. So I'm in favor of this. So I'd move the resolution.
We have a motion on the floor. Any other question or comment or discussion? Okay. Stevens, please call the roll.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel? Aye. Mr. McGlinnan? Aye. Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, our next item is a financial audit presentation. Leslie Roberts. Oh, Ms. Mellon's going to be it.
Good
My script
afternoon.
didn't have it right.
Oh, that's quite all right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. With us this afternoon is Leslie Roberts, who is our partner with Brown, Edwards and Associates, and she will present to you the 2018 financial report.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to be brief because I know you guys appreciate that and just touch on the highlights of the audit and the reports that we're required to deliver in conjunction with the audit. The audit went very well. Sue, Sharon, and the county team did really well. And we had a new GASB that we had to implement this year. And there were some delays, but they weren't caused by your finance team. They were caused by the state and getting information that we needed to implement that new GASB. But the larger delay was due to the school's audit being delayed. And as a result, the county's audit, since the school is a component unit, was not able to be issued on time. Now, they teamed up, the county and the school's finance team teamed up in a joint effort to get that audit done. Because of some turnover and some issues over there, things were delayed, and when we tried to start the audit, we weren't able to complete it when we thought we could. So basically, that was the delay. It was not on the part of the county. We had done all of the audit procedures on the county with the exception of pulling in the school's information. So I'm just going to go over the reports. The first report is the independent auditors report. It's kind of the bottom line where we're able to come in here, look at your records, and say that they present fairly your activities and your balances at the end of the year. And you do have another clean audit opinion. There is a paragraph in there that emphasizes the new GASB that you implemented, but that's not, that's not negative in any way, but that's just something you don't see from year to year. Every year, I point out that pages 4 through 9 are management's discussion and analysis, and this is a really good high-level read. I know you guys look at that CAFR and think, oh my gosh, this is just so much information, and it is a lot of information, but the management's discussion and analysis kind of gives some comparative information year over year, gives some idea of how the financials are put together, and it's a really good high-level read. So I just always like to point that out to you because I know it's kind of, it's kind of intimidating when you look at a CAFR. But this kind of brings it into focus and focuses you on the big issues. So take a look at that if you look at no other part of it. Again, I'm going over the reports, not the detail of the finances. The independent, we have like a couple of other reports that we issue in conjunction with our audit. One is the Independent Auditors Report over control over financial reporting. And we did have one material weakness, but it basically relates to the fact that the school's audit was delayed and the issues that we encountered. So I'm going to be discussing that with the school board. After I leave here, I'm going to their meeting and going over that material weakness. But because it's combined in with the county, you're seeing that in your report. And it's just basically referencing the school's report. There were no instances of noncompliance, so clean with the exception of that. There's another report that we issue related to your federal programs where you get money from the federal government, and we do kind of an audit within an audit. We go and pick some of the programs that you're participating in and make sure that you're complying with all the compliance requirements of that particular program or programs. And that's another report that we issue over that audit within an audit. And we had no exceptions or any compliance issues with that audit. So that's another clean report. The last report that we issue in conjunction with your audit that's in that CAFR, in that big volume, is an independent auditor's report on compliance with Commonwealth of Virginia laws, regulations, and contracts and grants. And we look at cash and investments. We look at unclaimed property, procurement, retirement systems, conflict of interest, that type of thing. We had one instance of noncompliance, and it was because you filed your CAFR late. And that was because of the delay from the school. You have to, the APA, Auditor of Public Accounts, makes you file it by 11:30, and that was impossible for the county to do without the school's information. And so they notified the Auditor of Public Accounts, the county staff, that they would be delayed, but they can't grant an extension. So we just have to write it up. But, and then there's a management letter, and most of your management letter, that's that other document that comes along with the CAFR where we kind of give recommendations and some high-level things. Most of yours is boilerplate. We point out the implementation of that new GASB 75. We also point out if you have some significant estimates embedded in your financials, we point that out. You have your useful life of your assets, that's an estimate. You have your pension liability, your OPEB liability, and you have your post-closure, DEQ post-closure liability for the landfill, and those things, and uncollectible accounts, what you will collect. We're always using historical information, but that is an estimate. So we point out all the estimates that are kind of embodied in your financials. Significant disclosures, we point those out. We feel like your capital assets are significant, and the disclosure related to it is. Your long-term debt is significant, and the disclosure related to that is significant. And your commitments and contingencies disclosure are all kind of very significant disclosures. If we had any difficulties encountered in the audit or we had any disagreements with management, we would meet with you before now, but we would formalize that in this document. We had none of that. Like I said, the audit went fine. We were ready to issue with the exception of getting the information from the schools and being able to do the settle up with the schools at the end of the year. There was one other matter. The DEQ requires you to report the landfill liability information as of 12/31. And so I'm talking to you, we issued the CAFR was issued in January, so it uses information from your financials. And so it couldn't technically be filed by 12/31 because we had to have the financial statement. So that's mentioned in there, as well as like an other matter. But otherwise, everything went really well, and you really should commend your school, the finance team, because they really did help the schools, and they worked as a really good team with the schools. And I'm thinking Sue has some more to say about that, right? Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Roberts? Hey, Ms. Mellon.
And I just wanted to add to publicly acknowledge both Sharon Day and Stephanie Lair from our staff who put in a lot of time and effort on the school team to be able to get their financial statements and get it, make it so that way we still had the unqualified opinion, which is very, very important to us. So I just wanted that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mellon. And you can stay right up there because we're going to roll. We're going to roll right into the public hearing for FY 2020 pre-budget.
And I think I put this in order on purpose.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring up something on this item. Thank you for all your hard work and all that, and I know how much you work so hard at your job and protect everything in the county as far as our budgets and what goes on. So thank you very much, Sue, for that, and your team. Mr. Chairman, I'd almost ask that a letter go out from this board to the school board and the superintendent of the schools and let them know that, even though this didn't cause us any hardship, it causes a lot more work, a lot more effort from our staff, and that this is something that we expect them to understand that this should not happen again, and that we will keep our eye on this item. Please. Thank you.
I will gladly work with the county administrator to make sure that communication is drafted and sent.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, I just want to echo Mr. Hippel's compliments to Ms. Mellon, Ms. Day, and her staff, their staff, and to Ms. Roberts, who I've seen now, I think, probably 6 times this year at various audit reports, who always does a very professional job and apparently works very well with our staff. So appreciate
it was a total team effort. I don't think we could have done it without every member of the team to complete all this work.
So I'd just like to also thank you. I think that it was your due diligence that started realizing that perhaps there was a little bit of an issue going on, and so you followed up immediately. And then from what I understand, your staff and Ms. Day put in, I know that there was some weekend time put in, et cetera, by you and members of your staff, and I am most appreciative. This has, I am very happy that we have the opinion that we did get, because it's very important to the financial stability of this county, which is not something that we take lightly at all, and you do an outstanding job of leading that. And so we want to make sure that we ensure that continues to happen for a long time to come. And so I'm quite certain that the school division will be working very closely with you to ensure that this does not happen again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I do believe that we do have a good working relationship with members of school staff, and we recognize that importance, and we work very hard to continue that positive relationship.
I would just like to add my appreciation as well to you and your staff and Ms. Day. I know you all work very hard, so thank you all very much for taking good care of James City County. We appreciate all you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so moving to the next item.
Moving to the next item, public hearing on the FY 2020 budget.
This is again, this is a rescheduled public hearing. It is our pre-budget public hearing. This is an opportunity for citizens to weigh in on the upcoming budget process. After this particular item, I believe you'll recess, or I'm not quite sure what the proper term is, into the work session room, and then we will give a presentation on where we stand with the budget at the present time. We are in the second year of a biennial budget, so we do have a plan that is out there. We'll provide updates to the plan in a few minutes, but at this time, I would ask that you open the public hearing for citizens to be able to speak to this, and no action is required at the end of this.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll open the public hearing on the FY 2020 pre-budget, and I have one speaker, Ms. Judy Fuss.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Judy Fuss. I live at 3509 Hunters Ridge in the Berkeley District. This past June, I was pleased, I guess I should say that while I was coming over here, Jason was giving his remarks to you on PDR, which is the subject of the first comment that I'd like to make about pre-budget. So if any of this seems to not fit, that's because I didn't hear everything he had to say. This past June, I was pleased to hear a majority of the board express support for James City County's PDR and green space programs. As laid out then in the staff presentation and the board discussion, these programs have brought both financial and aesthetic benefits to the county in the past and will continue to do so if reactivated. Interest from landowners persists, staff reports, but the $366,000 remaining for the program's use is not functionally adequate. I strongly support reactivating these valuable programs and directing FY 2020 budget funds to support easement purchases. I further support funding a staff position dedicated to administering these programs. Programs requiring extensive interface with citizens, as these do, need more time than can be found when program duties are shoehorned into an existing position, or, as you all discussed, spread among multiple existing positions. I also again ask that you continue funding the neighborhood stormwater matching grant programs that assist HOAs in effecting needed repairs and improvements to their stormwater management systems. In my HOA, as in many others in the county, volunteers are responsible for managing complex stormwater systems, despite having no technical knowledge or skills to do so. As an HOA board member, I can attest that the funding provided through these grants, and more importantly, the support and expertise county stormwater staff so willingly provides, have really been pivotal in getting our group on right track for effective ongoing maintenance of our system. Thank you for considering my input.
Thank you, Ms. Fuss. There are no other speakers, so let's see. So we'll close the public hearing at this point. And we'll take a motion to recess to go back into our work session in the other room and continue our last three items of the work session.
Motion?
Okay.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan? Aye. Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
of our work session back to order. And do you want to go with the closed session first, or are you going to do the roll call?
Do your roll call back. I go back in just
okay.
do the budget work.
Roll call back in.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye. Here.
Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Here. Okay.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Here where I.
Now,
I would do number 5.
number 5.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ms. Mellon, we will then move back to you for the pre-budget work session discussion.
Hello again. This is where we stand right now, looking at the figures. We give this presentation every year to sort of give you a feel of what we're seeing right now and what we expect to happen. So we'll give you the financial update, and then we'll also go over the timeline that we'll be going through this budget cycle. So first we start off with a little bit more detail on the general fund results. Okay, budgeted revenues came in slightly over budget. We had a $572,000 variance. And then we had underspending of about $3.2 million, most of it having to do with turnover savings. Out of that, almost 1.3 went to your capital reserve and capital projects areas of the fund balance. 618,000 was an increase to your health insurance reserve. That pretty much is a factor of not only your turnover, but also good experience on our health insurance for the past year. And then finally, the remaining amount goes into your fiscal liquidity. Some of the highlights, the revenues that exceeded budget were your real estate and personal property. We still see those coming in, I'd say fairly strong. They have still less than probably 1% variances, but because they're such large dollar amounts, they help your overall budget. Some of the revenues that did not meet budget were your sales tax for education, sales tax, and recordation and building permits. So looking at some of these trends in real estate, and this also gives you our most current forecast for fiscal year 20. Okay, we're still seeing steady increases in real estate. This year, it'll be entirely due to growth because there is not a reassessment in this particular budget cycle. Personal property taxes also show steady, moderate increases moving forward. Building revenues is an area that we do keep a close watch on. And in fiscal year 18 for recordation and in building permits, we saw a drop from the previous year. So far, for the first half of this year, those numbers are continuing to decrease. They're underperforming compared to last year. So this is an area that we are definitely keeping our eye on. We will be doing, I've been working with Mr. Holt from Community Development. We're going to be doing a deeper dive into the building permits because the numbers and the numbers of inspections are still stable and increasing, but the fee revenue is decreasing. And this is after an increase in fee revenues, if you recall, last fiscal year.
So on the recordation tax, would we normally collect that with a refinance?
I think it's refinance and also new.
But so if the refinances are down because of interest rates,
that has an impact. Yes, correct. The next area is consumer-driven revenues. Sales tax, you can see where the sales tax has increased significantly over the last 2 years, or this year, and then projected for next year. This is because of SB 942. In the future, we'll be showing this separated, so that way you can see what is the 1% local, and then what is the other 0.5% that's related to the tourism tax. I can tell you that what we're seeing is that the tourism tax is running about, on average for the first couple of months that we've gotten in, about 43% of the overall sales tax. So if you recall, because that tax does not include tax on groceries, okay? That is coming in where we expect it to be, maybe a little bit more. It's in the other area where we're still seeing some declines. And overall, last year, you can see where we had a decrease in sales tax. We continue to try to investigate this and look at this. One area we are now currently with SB 942. We are meeting regularly with the three jurisdictions. Both the finance staff and the Commissioner of Revenue staff are meeting together to try to make sure that we've got processes and procedures related to the new tax. But additionally, we're using this opportunity to try to figure out, hopefully, better ways to be able to monitor the tax. One of the big concerns continues to be with misreporting because of most of the realtors, retailers, and their software systems allocate sales tax based on zip codes. Okay, and so the Commissioner of Revenue for the City of Williamsburg had gave us a look at. She had picked 6 online retailers, and out of those 6, only one had the same percentage sort of going as population would be. Everything else, even like a PetSmart or Wayfair, the City of Williamsburg was getting a really high percentage of that online sales tax. So we actually, we most recently had a meeting where state representative from the Department of Taxation came down and said really the only way to address it is to have separate zip codes, which the Richmond area had done quite a few years back, and it's our understanding it took about 5 years. It's a very long and difficult process, but with the change with online sales tax moving forward, it may be something that you all would like for us to take a look into and be able to report back as to what that would entail to try to get a more accurate accounting of the sales tax that is generated by our citizens and coming into our general fund.
Yeah, because we could be losing quite a bit and not even know it.
Surely there's a simpler solution, though, in terms of using a software program that utilizes addresses, huh?
It was...
I mean, maybe we should talk to our legislators about some kind of direction to the State Department of Taxation on online sales.
We did ask at that meeting, if there was something that could be done at the state level, either in their software programs, and they had brought up that a lot of this is done even at the retailer level, whoever produces their software to be able to allocate sales tax. You have to influence them also. But the state would be much better at influencing those people than we would.
Could be a lot of money.
Yeah, it could be a
legislative agenda.
Yes. Our sales tax, I don't have the exact figures, and I can get those for you, but my last discussion with the Director of Finance over at the city is their sales tax is increasing, and ours is decreasing. So that, it tells me that some of this misallocation is really impacting our sales tax numbers. Meals tax continues to grow slowly, incrementally. So we have continued to forecast a slight increase in that area.
So can I just go back to the sales tax for just a second? And are we getting the full sales tax from internet sales?
No, not yet. Okay. The Wayfair decision, my understanding is that the state has to provide some direction first as to how it's going to, there's a process that has to be taken place at the state level first. And
so for that 1% to apply to internet sales, we have to expect the state to communicate to retailers.
I'm not quite sure what that process is at the state level, but the state has to take some actions first.
That's another issue for legislators to help us with.
But yeah, I would be interested in coming up with a plan on how we're going to pursue that. I mean, I hear you about, but if it is to start talking, I mean, zip codes and that kind of thing, you know, maybe it's a conversation we better start. So, but I've always, okay.
The other two areas that we have for consumer-driven revenues are both B-Poll and the lodging tax. Again, small incremental increases. There was a slight decrease in the lodging tax, both B-Poll and the lodging tax last year. The B-Poll is, we believe, mostly is a timing issue related to the payment of some of the business licenses, and but there was a slight decrease in lodging. So all this in total is driving us to currently taking a look at where we think the 2020 budget will be compared to the plan. We're being very conservative with our estimates at this given point in time. Do not know what the impact of the shutdown will be. We have a lot of course, federal employees that live in our area. So we will be looking very closely at those consumer-driven revenues for the month of January. We will have those coming in about, it'll come in March, right before we issue the proposed budget. The trends in the building revenues are a little concerning that they're going down, and that's the reason why we're going to do that deep dive before your next meeting to make sure that we're on target with that we feel very confident with those projections moving forward. If you recall, the last couple of years, and this year was another example, our overall budget has come in, the actual revenues have come in very, very close to what the overall budget is. So there's very little wiggle room on those revenues. We have generally seen a little bit above budget when it comes to the property taxes that help take care of any other variances if there are areas where we're not meeting our projections. So right now we're at a very conservative. I think the best case scenario will be us pretty much being, we're going to be pretty much along the lines of the 2020 plan. There may be some differences one way or another, but we think that the plan in general will be good moving forward. Couple of the highlights as it comes to the expenditures as to what's included in the plan as a reminder. There is a $1.7 million planned increase for school contribution. This does include an estimated increase in the sales tax for education from the state. That is a pass-through. It does include 6 new firefighter positions. And this, you'll see, this one is a full year of 6. There's half a year from last year, and then we will, the plan is to bring 3 on beginning of the year and 3 on mid-year. The remaining 3 new police officer positions for the additional zone, and the second half of implementing the Evergreen compensation study. Before we go into the timing, are there any questions that you all have.
The 1.7 for schools, is that's in a conversation you've had with their CFO, or
That
do you
was
foresee?
That was what we had in the plan.
In the plan, okay, so we don't know.
So that is not
finalized.
No, that is not finalized.
Okay.
You know, that does, in relation to what the overall priorities are, what the overall funding is that they all have coming in from. They do have anticipate increases from the state with the governor's budget. All that works through the cycle, and hopefully we end up having good numbers from the state before we issue our proposed budgets.
Okay.
So this is the timeline that we have for the budget. We anticipate having the county administrator's proposed budget completed by March 29th. April 9th is the public hearing for citizens to comment on the county administrator's proposed budget. We have 2 work sessions scheduled, April 23rd and April 30th. And May 14th is where we are scheduled for you all to adopt the county administrator's budget with any changes that you may have. And then we will go ahead and complete all the work and post it to the website. And I can send this to you. That's on the website. It is also on the website currently. So any additional questions, or if there's...
I had one question that it actually came from the documents you had here for the audit. And it was talking about long-term debt, and it looked like we had some for the landfill closure, and that next year it had gotten to be a very small number. Is it going away? Is the debt? Did we have incurred debt for expenses for the closure of that, or how does that? Because it was out of the debt service fund, just what I noticed.
Sharon, do you want to take this?
I know previously there had been $1 million corrective action that had been in reserve that had to be there for, I believe it was 5 to 10 years, depending on how long it took to go through that process. And that process was completed during fiscal year 18, so the $1 million reserve went away. And now that's just part of the general fund.
Okay.
I know Grace has indicated they believe that the landfill will be cleared and done in a year or 2.
Okay.
Because recreation has hopes of bike trails and things here once it is cleared and closed. That's still a year or more left.
I know it's been the same number for a number of years. It's just adjusted for CPI every year.
I think it was like $1 million something, and then the next year it was like 100,000 or something.
Yes, the $1 million corrective action.
Yeah. So, but there's still a little bit there. Is that?
It's a requirement.
Just being held in reserve is, okay. We're not actually retiring debt that's associated with that. That's where it's accounted for. Okay. Thank you.
Let me just ask about schools. I know that all this will be dependent on what the legislature does, but talk of a significant increase in teacher salaries would suggest that we ought to be thinking about how we will accommodate that, because a relatively small share of that will come from the state, if I'm correct.
Only SOQ position.
Yes, I did watch the school budget presentation that was given, and from that, the governor's budget has a 5% increase required, but it allows for it to be accomplished over the biennium. And last year, the schools awarded 3%, so they're only mandated for 2% this year.
I see.
It was suggested that they may want to consider something more than that. And they had suggested in a 4 to 5% range, and that would put them above the funding levels that have been published thus far. So.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you. Thanks, Mo.
So I don't see in our in our schedule, we don't have a, we had talked about doing one community meeting with all 5 of us there, at perhaps like the night of the neighborhood forum or something. So that possibly may still be
I think didn't we adopt this? I thought we adopted your meeting schedule with one of those dates set aside. We'll confirm that and come back to it.
Okay.
Yes, this morning they were looking to try to find a venue because the rec center, it wasn't conducive at. So they're still working on that.
Didn't we do one at Legacy?
Didn't we do one at Legacy?
We were talking about that as well. Jason had suggested that, and so yes, we are working on that. They couldn't confirm a Wednesday or Thursday date. It was a Friday date. We didn't figure Friday was a good date.
Yeah, won't get many people out on Friday.
Maybe.
Is that your choice, Dave?
No, you want to get them out, just put a keg out, right?
That's right.
So, okay. We are down to our next item then. Thank you. Workforce Housing Task Force update. Ms. Zeidler, Chair of the Task Force. Ms. Zeidler.
She was out.
Yeah. Let me go make sure she's. They're right here. Okay.
Imagine.
How much do I think
Good afternoon.
So you can get you queued up on the machine.
Oh, good.
In a small room.
Thank you all for being here. Tyler, if you would like to introduce the folks and proceed with the brief.
Well, I'm not introducing your staff.
Okay.
I will introduce myself.
Okay.
I'm Jean Zeidler. I'm co-chair of the Workforce Housing Task Force. Our other co-chair, Christina Hartless, again, could not be with us because she is at work, which is a good thing. But we do have our vice chair, Kim Ortner, who is here with me, and we're going to kind of tag team this presentation. And also our wonderful consultant, Lisa Sturdivant, who, if we get to questions, she'll answer them. Anyway. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, thank you so much for inviting us here to give you an update on the work of the Workforce Housing Task Force, which is winding down. We're nearing completion. And so I wanted to just sort of go through initially what we have done in the past 13 months. We did meet for the first time in December 2017 to really just be oriented, to get to know each other, to talk about all of our interests in workforce housing, and then met for the first time to begin work in January of 2018. And that started our monthly meetings with your very able staff and a great consultant. January through March, as you can see by the slide, we spent time with the guidance of the staff and the consultant to define workforce housing as we would use that phrase in the work that the task force was doing. We also agreed upon a vision that would guide our work and some guiding principles as well, which we'll go into a little later. But we felt like that work was really important and foundational to set the values for the task force and what we agreed that we would like to have our recommendations kind of be the foundation for those recommendations. April through July, we looked at a lot of data on housing needs, on populations in James City counties, but also background on current county programs, both housing programs and land use and zoning tools. And then in August through December of 2018, we reviewed with our consultants and staff best practices from communities throughout Virginia and from other parts of the country. We, at that point, broke the task force into subcommittees so that we could do more focused work on several areas. There was one on land use strategies, one on financial tools, and another on affordable home ownership and housing preservation. And so in December, that work kind of culminated in a development of some preliminary recommendations and a discussion of how we might prioritize the recommendations, because I think we remember from the last time we met with you, you wanted priorities, and we definitely agree with that. Our meeting this month in January, we, I'm not going to say finalized, but we definitely settled on draft recommendations and a draft report, which you have in your materials for today's meeting. So ultimately, this draft report that you have before you is the result of 13 months of work on the part of the task force. And I think on behalf of the task force, we want to say that we appreciate the resources, both staff and consultant resources, that you made available to support the work of the task force. And we also appreciate the guidance and leadership from this board in moving forward with the recommendations. I would say that we do recommend that a standing citizen working group be considered for establishment to support the board and staff in implementing these recommendations, because very few of them can be accomplished overnight. So I'll toss it to Kim.
Okay. What is workforce housing? There really is no standard definition of workforce housing, though it's a term used quite often by many communities throughout Virginia and the country. So the task force, we really had quite a time coming to a consensus that we want to define workforce housing broadly as housing that is affordable to any working individual or family. Our recommendations really focused on households with incomes up to the area median income where needs are the greatest.
So why workforce housing? I think this chart gives us a pretty good idea. But also to say that in November of 2016, when the board adopted the 2035 strategic plan, it includes the goal of, quote, expanding and diversifying the local economy, end quote. And as part of meeting that goal, the 2035 strategic plan calls for supporting strategies to facilitate the development of affordable and workforce housing. So the Workforce Housing Task Force was established to develop and work on those strategies and make recommendations to the board. This work recognizes the importance of stable and affordable housing to individuals and families in James City County. And it also recognizes the important link between workforce housing availability and a strong economy.
As part of our process, task force members reached a consensus on a vision and a set of principles that guided their work over our work over the 13-month period. Our vision: James City County will be a diverse community offering a high quality of life and quality affordable housing options in safe, well-maintained, and inclusive neighborhoods.
And the principles that we agreed to guide our work are the ones you see on the slide before you, that workers in James City County should be able to afford to live in the county if they chose to do so. That James City County should promote strategies that create and sustain mixed income neighborhoods. That creating a range of affordable housing options in James City County requires partnerships among the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. And I think very importantly, James City County's solutions for workforce housing should be designed to respect the county's unique natural, historic, and cultural resources.
At the meeting you held in September, you were presented with a lot of information about housing needs in James City County, so we don't want to repeat that discussion. But here are some of the most important findings from the assessment of housing needs. There is a need for a more diverse housing stock in James City County in order to provide housing options for a range of working households. And while there is a need for housing all along the income spectrum, low and moderate income households face the greatest needs.
The task force realized very early on, if we didn't know it when we walked into the room, that workforce housing is very complex. And therefore, there isn't 1, 2, or 3 single initiatives or policies that can solve the workforce housing challenge. As a result, the task force developed a toolbox of initiatives that the County Board of Supervisors and county staff could consider for implementation. Some of our recommendations can be acted on immediately, while others will take more time to collect information, identify resources, and develop plans. The Workforce Housing Task Force strategy recommendations are organized into the 4 categories you see on this slide: housing preservation, housing production, housing access, and funding. And within each of these groups are steps that the county can take now to begin to make a difference in addressing workforce housing issues. For example, in our housing preservation strategies, we recommend that the county continue the process of selecting deteriorating single-family homes to be rehabilitated with state and local funding and set goals to expand the number of homeowners served. As part of our housing production recommendations, we include steps the county can take in the near term to set the appropriate environment to encourage private sector production of workforce housing. Steps such as modifying the county's accessory apartment ordinance and developing an inventory of publicly owned land are some examples of recommendations that will help set the stage to promote responsible development of workforce housing. Our recommendations also reflect the reality that the challenge of housing affordability is regional and not just a local issue, which means that solutions should include regional approaches. As such, among our housing access strategies is a recommendation that the county financially support the regional Hampton Roads Housing Resource Portal to expand local workers' access to information and assistance.
So to reiterate, the task force is presenting a toolkit to the board. We are recommending that the county should adopt a range of approaches and make available the necessary resources to have a comprehensive workforce housing strategy.
So Kim or I or Lisa would be happy to answer any questions you might have, but I would say that this report is in draft, and we're really here today to hear any comments or suggestions that you might have that we could take back to the task force as we finalize our work.
I have a quick question, if I may. Was part of your discussion inclusive of where some of these developments, or whatever, however you want to call them, where they would be located in the county? Is that going to be part of our comp plan update? How is that determined?
Yeah, so some of the recommendations really do reference that they need to go into the comp plan update. We did not locate specific areas at all.
With the exception of the opportunity zone.
Right. That's right.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I will add is the task force did spend a lot of time talking about the importance of thinking about where existing transit was located and identifying, keeping those areas in mind when strategies related to intensifying housing were as part of the recommendations to really focus on transit access.
How would this in turn tie into housing partnerships and what the work that they're doing throughout the county and utilizing their efforts into what we're trying to put together here?
I think that's a really good question, and that we definitely talk. Well, the Habitat for Humanity executive director was on the task force, and so there was a lot of discussion about rehabilitation programs and preserving what's already there.
Right.
And a reoccurring theme in all of our conversation was the need for partnerships.
Right.
That nobody's doing this alone.
That's what I was thinking, kind of partner with that group as well and seeing if we can bring them into what we're doing and get a bigger bang for the buck, as to say. Mm-hmm. Good.
I really like the idea of the working group I think that's needed to keep us accountable, to not put this away, but to keep it being a living document. Did you have any idea what that looked? Did you get beyond like what that looked? How does that look like? Or
No, but we can talk about that at our next meeting.
okay, I'd be curious as to what you think that looks like.
Yeah, I'd be curious too, because, you know, you got 13 months of work here, and you don't want it to go on a shelf somewhere and be forgotten.
Right.
And there's a lot of effort and a lot of time that y'all put into this. And, you know, and there's I've got 24 questions on, you know, some of the things as far as funding and that sort of thing. But that's something I think the working group would slowly bring to us and say, we found, you know, strategies for funding, and we found, you know, how to preserve some of the houses that we have with partnering with other companies or other, maybe some of our Kiwanis clubs or Ruetan clubs and that sort of thing, and doing a partnership with them, and you going in there and basically that's how housing partnership started, you know, grabbing a few people here and there and just that building on that. So, you know, but yeah, it's a lot of good work.
Well, I think as you look through this report, that the recommendations are very diverse. Some of them are maybe what would be called low-hanging fruit. Others of them are things to think about, to do more research on, and are much longer in development. Some of them really reinforce things the county is already doing and saying this is good work and important, and keep doing it and maybe expand it. So I think there's a real range of things that a working group can do going forward, looking at these recommendations and trying to flesh them out a little more.
And I know when you're, you know, you don't want to put everybody in one neighborhood. You know, you want to try to spread everything out so, you know, it's more even. But sometimes the cost side of it, it's better to build one area, not for everybody, but serving a larger group, and it becomes a community within itself. And you can put affordable houses closer and tighter, and you may have 3 different houses to pick from, and 3 bedrooms, and there's not much other than that, and you can make a pretty simple, straightforward house to give somebody a start up, and then they later sell that to someone else, and they move into a neighborhood somewhere else, or, you know, they still have that, but it gives them that first step to, you know, be able to, you know, start building, you know, a nest egg with what they have in that house and the equity they have there in order to move up to another house. And, you know, we've all done it. You start out a little house and we move into a bigger house, and then we go back to the little house.
I think one of the interesting recommendations and something that we talked about, it isn't all only about building new housing, it's preserving what's there.
Right.
Your comments about housing partnership are right on the money, but I think also we had very interesting discussions about trailer parks and recognizing that that is a valuable asset, but they need to be places that are healthy, secure, and safe.
Right.
And so what are some strategies that could be?
Just out of curiosity, the housing rehabilitation, when you talk about enhancing what we do, I think we have a program already, but what's the extent of it? In other words,
10 houses a year.
10 houses a year?
About.
Okay.
Well, there's several different programs. I mean, the housing unit does, do them as either as loans or grants based on people's income.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a rural rehab program that we're doing currently where we're trying to do 10 homes that are in very substandard condition.
Okay.
But we leverage housing partnerships and we leverage other community organizations that are already doing that work to offset our costs. So those partnerships exist, and I think, but again, we can only do so much with the resources we have, and so we know the need is greater.
Okay.
I want to congratulate you all for taking on such a daunting task. As you say, it's almost impossible to get a grasp of everything here. You just think of every way in which things are connected, and when we get things like applications for tourist homes or Airbnb special use permits, things like that, my first thought is And that may be taking a house off the market that would be accessible. On the other hand, maybe there's a homeowner who would benefit from the extra income. So they get very complicated. And I really do appreciate the diversity of recommendations and so forth. Especially, I'm very interested in seeing what can be done about those mobile home parks that really are substandard in a lot of ways. There are a couple of things that I would maybe just think about a little bit. A lot of the statistics in it convey an impression, and some of the language conveys an impression, I think, that may feed into the concern of a lot of citizens that our rate of growth is already too high. And when we say that everybody should be able to find some place, it really just suggests the idea that, build. And I think that is a source of considerable resistance. And when you see the actual recommendations, you're talking about smaller numbers. And so I think that it might be useful to kind of bring those more into sync. A second aspect of it that I understand, and I think it makes a great deal of sense to talk about workforce housing as opposed to doing it on the basis of an income description, right? But an awful lot of it is couched into they should show that they're working in James City County, that they have that they are employed, and there are other people who are in need of this housing as well, who may not be in a position to be working, either because of retirement or because of disability or other causes. And I don't want to lose those housing concerns by an overemphasis on the idea that this is just to deal with workforce. It is, I think, to deal with people whose incomes don't allow them to have a wider variety of choices available to them. So those are a couple of things that I'd be a bit concerned about. If you listen to our previous discussion, you know that budget numbers may not be as, I think we've spent this state sales tax money several times over already. And I did notice that in one of your recommendations, the calculation was overly generous. In other words, you took the full 1% plus some to decide how much money was going to be generated, and half of that is taken off immediately for the tourism fund. And so it's really a lot smaller number than that would indicate. We do, of course, have affordable housing proffered. One significant one, maybe some smaller ones, Paul, but Stonehouse is really the big one, where there were 3,000 units that at $1,000 a unit, a proffer from the developer. Now we're going to be, I assume, before too long, being approached to revise those proffers once again, and that will certainly be a topic of discussion, I would think. But that's a significant source of funding for a trust fund. Potentially, I don't know how long it will take to build out whatever number of houses ultimately remains in the Stonehouse plan. But it is something that's already dedicated there. If the state had not messed around with the proffer system in 2016, that would have been something that we would have gone forward with. We do have a affordable housing policy that is focused on trying to say to a developer coming in, and I was surprised I didn't see that really referenced in the discussion, because I think the idea was we were going to try to move that into an ordinance. And the only other thing that I would mention at this point is, again, that I know there's a nod to regionalism in the report. I still think that James City County is not an island in this. We're part of a broader area. We have people who come here who actually commute shorter distances from, say, Newport News or York County than they would from other parts of James City County, or they commute from King William or New Kent to the upper end of the county. There are people who are moving across our jurisdictional lines, both from James City into the city of Williamsburg or York County and so forth. And again, that kind of contributes to a sense of a more overwhelming problem than the solutions seem to suggest can really make a difference. And so, again, I thank you very much for all the good work you did on this and are continuing to do on it. But just thought I'd bring those points up.
And it's amazing on your thought of people moving from one place to the other. You look at the transportation maps, and you'll see it's amazing how many people leave here and go to Virginia Beach and come to Virginia Beach or go to Suffolk and see the numbers and how much is being traveled. And I'm like, good gracious, no wonder why the roads are congested, because the traveling that are people to find the job that they want, not necessarily the job that fits them at that time, but the one they're looking for. And I agree with John that that number there can get skewed a little bit just because of the whole transportation issue in itself. But apartments, that's another. And I know we don't allow now. If I'm correct, we still don't allow mobile homes and all, and we stopped allowing that years ago. But that might be something that we'll have to look at, and also look at a flatter track with tighter buildings, in order to cluster more in one area, because that's the only way we're going to get it affordable. If we cut the roads down, cut the infrastructure down, cut the yards down, and cut all that down, because with what we have now, we'll never get there. I mean, affordable to James City County is 300, where really it's not. Affordable is 120, 150, and so that's so we've got to think of how many. If we build an area out, how many lots and how much we can put on there while we're doing the other things as far as rehabilitating other places and looking at maybe an apartment complex and a host of different building options to try to fill this gap. And it's a tough gap. Y'all took on a great job. I mean,
I said I was done. I really have two other minor things. Well, not minor things. It is important to always recognize, and I think it comes through in one of the statistics that you may have used, or maybe I read it in the other, the housing needs assessment. But I think it was in yours. Maybe it was taken from that for yours. And that is basically for us to understand that in this particular area, people. There are a significant number of people who buy less housing than they need, or than they can afford, rather. Buy less housing than they can afford, and that makes it. Then you're competing with people in lower income levels, and it's a serious problem that the market really can't adapt to. Which is why I tend to think that for the folks that you're talking about focusing on here, there really has to be some involvement by government in order to ensure that there's access for people at lower income levels. The final thing is just that a big part of this, not all of it, but a big part of it could be resolved with better wages.
Yes, that came up many times.
Yes.
With that, everything else goes up. So the houses go up.
We'll let you pay the difference.
The extra 10 cents on my
the other thing we may have to guard against is investments. If somebody can come in and buy a house at this price and then rent it out, we've killed exactly what we're trying to do. We've taken that affordability right off the table, and now it's an investment. So that's where you've got to kind of watch it that doesn't happen and take over the market that you're trying to create in order to give somebody a chance to have their own house and be able to move forward.
I would like to mention, since you mentioned Stonehouse, one of the number one item that I hear from constituents at my end of the county is they want it to stay rural. That's the only little sweet spot left as far as the rural character. And that is the number one issue that I hear from people is they're tired of it all. So
You need to come up
So
with
they want to
and submit a request to be taken out of the PSA.
That's a big subdivision.
Well, yeah. I'm just saying, it's a lot of people who just like it the way it is and just want to stay put, so.
Yeah, it would help if they didn't just say, so let's move it down to Groveland.
Well, they don't say that at all. That what they're saying is that they appreciate the rural character of that end of the county, so that's just something to,
Yeah, it is absolutely.
to keep in the back of your minds as we're going through this process.
When I came in,
I'd be remiss if I didn't speak on their behalf.
Well, I think that just underscores the complicated nature of this problem and the conversations that the task force had about being cautious and looking for balance. So, your comments about people who are commuting in. I don't think anybody in that task force was worried about somebody who lived in Williamsburg coming into James City County to work, I mean, so, and it really is hard to tease out what those numbers are. And so it's really, being mindful of balance and keeping the rural character, but also providing what people need here to, and what the economy needs and what families need for decent living.
Yeah, it's very, the housing isn't, it just ripples through so many things because it is very difficult to redistrict schools in this community because of our housing. We're very segregated income. I mean, out my way, there's not that many houses or homes where below 300,000, and it's 300,000 and up, and it could be up to 500,000. I drove down Neckaland Road yesterday, Paylegs, this new development that's in huge homes, huge. I mean, that income. So when you've isolated parts of your population, it just makes it very difficult on all types of schools, transportation, you name it. So balance is the word, and I don't know how you.
And one of our values was inclusive communities.
Yeah, I'm all about it, but how we get there is that's that working group.
Private sector driven.
Well, I want to add my comments. I had a chance to sit and read through the report, and I'm very impressed. You guys have done a superb job so far. Of course, I've had some inside information from some of your committee members who've been beating on me about it, and I think in fact, I saw a lot of this information presented and discussed at some public meetings in the community, which I think was very, very helpful. I think it highlights for people the degree of a problem that a lot of people in our community don't recognize that we have. So I commend you on the work you've done on this, and look forward to the final and how we're going to establish that working group going forward.
Well, we will finalize our report at the February meeting and submit it to you. Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next will be Curbside Recycling Project Agreement. Grace, but is Grace outside here?
Yes, she is.
Wonderful. You're on, Grace.
I'll look through this.
It's hard to see it. Answers.
Hey, Grace.
It is? Okay. Well, I couldn't find it. I knew that wasn't true.
Hey, John.
Good evening.
Okay. Nate, I don't know if I want to hear it.
So we're here to talk about curbside recycling.
Woo-woo!
So Chairman Eisenhower, members of the board, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Kinsman, you had before you this evening the next 5-year contract between James City County and the Virginia Peninsula's Public Service Authority, otherwise known as VIPSA, for residential curbside recycling service. There are actually two contracts in your packet. The one you will be considering today is the one between James City and VIPSA. We contract with VIPSA, and VIPSA contracts with the provider. As you know, our current contract with County Waste expires June 30th of 2019. And VIPSA has been providing services, procuring services for curbside recycling since 1991 for James City, City of Williamsburg, York County, and the City of Poquoson. The combined house count for all four localities totals approximately 40,000. James City's house count is currently at 25,000. By combining the house counts for the four localities, we produce more interest and better pricing. This past August, VIPSA put together a request for proposal on behalf of the four cities and counties for curbside recycling for the next 5-year cycle. 2 proposals were received: Tidewater Fiber Corporation, known as TFC, and County Waste. After review by the participating localities and VIPSA, TFC was selected to provide these services. At the November board work session, we discussed the significant cost increase. And staff provided you with a few options, and you asked us to pursue the hybrid program where we would share the costs with our citizens. We explored the following billing options and their costs. We talked about HRUBs and JCSA. We thought that adding a fee to the JCSA bill seemed the easiest and most cost-effective route, but under the current State Water and Wastewater Authorities Act, JCSA lacks the power to bill or collect fees for recycling because it's not a service furnished by JCSA. HRUBs, we are reaching out to HRUBs directly, discussing a separate bill for curbside recycling and collecting through county office, and we are currently waiting on a cost for that. VIPSA is not equipped to handle mass billing. They currently do not have adequate space, software, including security, to bill or collect these services. James City, through the Treasurer's Office, have some of the same challenges. They are set up to, they already provide billing and collection for citizens. Citizens are familiar with the Treasurer's Office being a point of collection. We anticipate the cost to the citizens, regardless of the billing option, being approximately $5 to $6 per month, where they would be billed quarterly. Although we are still working through billing options, the item for your consideration this evening is the contract approval between JCC and VIPSA, so that VIPSA, on behalf of the four localities, can move forward with the contract between VIPSA and TFC. The agreement has already been approved by York, Williamsburg, and Poquoson. York and Poquoson are evaluating their current fees. And it's, I'm not going to say most likely, they're probably going up also. So Mr. Geisler is here today if you have any questions, but staff recommends approval of this agreement.
I had, first of all, I guess the costs we were paying prior to now out of the general fund was about 800,000, was it? 500. 500. Okay, so about 500,000. And we figured that it was going to go up to somewhere in the vicinity of 1.88. Mm-hmm. So how much of that difference is generated by the $5 to $6 a month that we're
It would be the 1.2.
In other words, I guess my question is, with that billing, how much will our general fund contribution increase? Is there, we're sharing that part of that increase, is that correct? So we would go from 500,000 up to something?
We're trying to, our plan is to stay at what we currently had budgeted, which is the 5.
Okay.
And not increase that.
Okay, so in other words, that the 500,000 that we currently pay, that's what we'll still continue to pay out of the general fund. That all of the additional money from that 500,000 to 1.8 would be generated by this $5 to $6 per house per month.
Correct.
Okay.
So Grace, help me back on numbers. Currently, we're being billed around $2 a month, not quite, right? Under the current contract, it's about $2 a month is what we're paying per resident that receives service.
$1.58-ish.
$1.60, okay. Mm-hmm. You're saying $6 is the new contract?
It's $3.75 per household plus a $95 processing fee, then billing on top of that.
So what do we think that will be without the billing piece? What do you think that piece is?
The billing piece.
From 160 to how much for just the recycling component?
Without the billing?
Yes, sir.
The effective cost is about $5.70.
So we're going from $1.60 to $5.70. And then Grace, you and I talked about the billing being somewhere in $1.50 a month range.
Correct.
So that takes us from around $2 to around $7 per month.
Yeah. Plus.
A little more than $7.50 a month. So we're going from less than $2 to $7.50 a month. $7.20.
For $5.70 at $1.50.
Yeah, good. Just trying to get our numbers right because it's not, the numbers aren't clear in the contract. Yeah. Because of there's a fee and then the landfill fee, so it's not as simple as, which was a better version of the contract for VIPSA and therefore for us, because they did have that other option that didn't get into the tipping costs, but that's why the costs are not as clear. It is clear we're supposed to pay the contractor, but when you break it down by household, you're getting back. So we're from $1.60 to $7.20.
And essentially, the full increase is being billed. We're not putting any more general fund money into it.
Yeah. And there's no requirement that there be any particular level of participation by James City residents, or is there?
The contractor has agreed to hold their price up to 40% at up to 40% of the current rate.
And currently, we're responsible for more than half of the total.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. James City County has about 25,000 households right now, and the contractor has agreed to hold their price up to 10,000 homes.
And why do we have such a high level? Why does York have such a low level?
York has, I think you said 40,000, the number 50,000, but York County has 18,000 homes in the program.
Right. Okay. Right, and we have 26, but our population is roughly comparable.
Yeah.
They're a little smaller than us now, but not much.
I believe that maybe there's some of the townhomes.
Oh, maybe they're more multifamily.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's certainly possible.
So the people that are, so how are we going to roll this out? Does somebody sign up? So I say, okay, yes, I want to recycle. Or do I, because I take it I'm going to get a new, am I going to get a new bin? Or, because that's,
Right now, there's a significant benefit, I think, to all parties for TFC to purchase the carts that are on the street right now are owned by County Waste.
Yeah.
And there's a significant benefit to everybody involved for TFC to purchase those carts from County Waste. They have already had discussions about that. And hopefully things will work out. County Waste doesn't have to go get the carts. TFC doesn't have to deliver carts. And I don't have to worry about the cart that I put out every Thursday morning disappearing and waiting for a new one to show up. It'll just work for everybody.
okay. So I say I'm in $6 a month.
$7.20.
No, it's not. $7.20 is total. $6 is
Yeah,
it's the difference between $1.60 and $7.20.
$7.20 or whatever.
It's $5 or $6. Let's call it $6.
$6. I'm in So I got to sign up somewhere because this new system, you're not, if my neighbor across the street from me sticks out their tub, but they haven't committed to the $6 a month, I assume we're not picking it up.
Correct.
Because we've got no way to get their money.
Yes, so we were doing the, trying to think through the opt-in and opt-out option. And so if we do the opt-out option where the, the bins are already there, and then if people did not provide the, or didn't pay the service, then we would pick up their bin.
Okay.
So it's going to be a lot of communication up front. We're still working through a lot of those, processes and trying to get the word out. How are we going to get the word out? Maybe it's tagging bins.
It's my only part of my concern is administratively cost to get into this without knowing for sure that it's going to be $720, I guess. I mean, I wish we knew that administrative costs piece.
The treasurer's office put a pretty significant amount of effort into staffing and billing. It added some staff. That's where we're coming up with that $1.50 a month. I think that's the high end for us. You don't have to make that final decision on that cost to the resident until we get our RUBS number or through the budget process.
Okay.
We need to be able to communicate that, I think, and bill residents in May so that we can bill them late May, have their payment back before July 1st so we know who's in, so we would pre-bill.
Okay.
At least that's what we recommend to you. We just assume everybody's in unless they tell us they're not.
Yeah, because I did write down, what do we do if they don't pay? Do we go?
We pick it up.
Well, my question was,
grab their bin?
which was to what Ruth had said was whether it's an opt-in, opt-out. Basically, what you would say is there are 25,000 of us right now who are recycling.
Yes.
You're going to assume that we're all going to be there. You're going to bill everybody, and then anybody who says no, I don't want it, you would cut them out and pick up their bin.
Mm-hmm.
And what
is that essential?
That's where I am today. I think Grace is at the moment. I mean, that's where we're trying to be, is that we assume everybody's in. I've had some tell me that it doesn't matter what recycling costs they're in. But that being said, we have a very high percentage who do recycle. Steve's pointed that out. I do think of the 25,000, you'll have 15,000 plus that choose to pay a reasonable fee. Because they feel that it's the right thing to do. And the contract does allow for us to drop down a little below that and our contribution stay about where it is. But that is some effort to coordinate all that. And then there'll be people coming and going, right?
Yeah, so who takes on that responsibility? So I move,
Just like you have to call for water and sewer, right? Recycling will be another call.
Okay.
Whether it's to VIPSA, maybe once we get through the initial onslaught, right? The onesies and twosies a week. I think that we can handle much easier than the initial piece is going to be the challenge. If you have 5,000 people that don't want in and they've all called us, that's a lot of calls to take, and we're staffing to figure that out.
Because York and Williamsburg, I can't speak to Poquoson, but York and Williamsburg, this is part of their
garbage
their garbage pickup. So they're not having this administrative piece. It's
correct. And we're talking about billing quarterly. I mean, I hate to send you a $6 bill or whatever it is every month. I'd rather send you a $15 bill.
So why can't we do the 6-month bill?
You could.
And send it out with the property tax.
As
part of the property tax.
We could. And your downside of that is that I may be a renter, and then that's a way to do it. We certainly discussed that option. Really thought it would come back to the property owners not wanting to pay their tenants' cost, but that certainly could be done. And maybe that would save on the postage piece and some collection.
I mean, it seems to me that if what we're trying to do is to make this as easy for everyone involved, for the citizen, you're paying your property tax at that time anyway. It's not another bill that's coming in every month.
Right.
Sort of nickel and diming. It's not an overwhelming amount of additional revenue.
Are you talking about personal property or real estate?
Real estate.
Because I don't get my.
Well, you don't get your real estate.
I don't
either.
either.
It goes straight to my mortgage.
Personal property would be the only way to do it, because that's the one.
Well, no, because personal property, then you're going to run into a lot of people who are in apartments and things of that nature.
But if you do it every 6 months, it'll just be a bill coming in.
I'd be happy for my mortgage company to pay my recycle bill, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, but you're paying your mortgage companies. That's right. It's
well, yeah, true. Yeah.
I mean, and the flip side of it, of course, is just to say it's a penny on the tax rate. There, I just put that out there.
That's what Grace would like you to say. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, that does make it.
I got some in your eye.
That makes it simpler. Again, I think that.
Right. But then it doesn't cover everybody.
It doesn't, and it takes away that money from something else.
Yeah, 77,000. You have 25,000 in the pot. The other 50 are paying.
I'm not sure that's where you want to use up that.
Right. That's where I believe.
Say that for
your school.
But for us, this billing issue is something to overcome. Local governments overcome it all the time. Once you're in it, it's an easier to figure out beyond there. So Grace and staff have put a lot of effort. We will get you a good solution, whether it's every 6 months or whether it's quarterly or whether it's monthly.
Well, are you leaning more towards using the treasurer's office versus FIPSA or HRUBs? I mean,
we haven't got a proposal from HRUBs, but
Right. So they would do the billing piece, and then the collection piece would be through the treasurer. So as soon as we get that cost back, what it's per bill, and then per billing cycle.
And to Mr. McGlennan's point, if we bill semi-annually, that would probably cut your costs of operating, and personally, I agree, for $6 a month, I'd rather pay one bill every 6 months than mess with it on a monthly or quarterly basis.
Right. I agree.
So
I think we were trying to give you what we thought was a worst case scenario tonight, because the approval of the agreement with FIPSA doesn't set you in stone to your monthly fee yet or how you bill it. We could still have that discussion over the next month or two.
Right.
But we'll make sure with the treasurer's office on the tax bills, if that's where you wanted to have that as an option, we can talk through those in a month or so as part of the budget.
As that, if we go, I know there's probably agreement won't cover that, but say we have 25,000 and in 2-3 years we have 35,000. It won't change the price for this contract, this 5-year contract, but then it'll be renegotiated in 5 years. It may change the price in, because I would think the more we get in the system, the lower the cost would be. Would that be correct to say?
Generally, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, we're not talking about $4, but $1 or something.
Well, but the subsidy would become lower for every user.
Right.
So the $500,000 is now spread over another 10,000 people. $500,000 that we're paying out of general funds.
Right.
And so actually, I was wondering about, so if we drop down to 10,000, the cost could actually be lower for the individuals who are actually participating. But then you get into an equity issue, because then people are going to say, well, why are you subsidizing them doing their recycling? So that was an issue.
I think ultimately, if we come back to revisiting the proposal of years ago about doing a countywide trash pickup where this would be incorporated, that might be something we want to revisit, because isn't that what the city basically does?
City does.
Yeah.
New York City
New York does it through contract as well. So.
But Steve tells me that ship has sailed for us.
Yeah.
Too many localities, too many subdivisions have already made their own side deals. But I suspect that our deal would be cheaper, just because it gets a lot more volume.
Sale.
I was going to say, my community, so we've negotiated with two different people, and the prices keep going up on both of them. So.
Okay. All right, so we have to approve this agreement?
Yeah, as well as any more questions or discussion? All right. Since this is one where we do have a resolution, our resolution is to resolve this issue under the Virginia Peninsula Public Service Authority Curbside Recycling Program Project Agreement. That was the resolution that was in your in the packet. We'll look for a motion.
I'll move approval of the resolution.
Mr. McGlennon, and we'll move Mr. Stevens.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank y'all very
Thank you for all the
much.
work.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, we are down to board requests and directives. If there's anything people want to do before we do a closed session.
Let me get a calendar.
Ken's got enough direction out of the way are tonight, all right?
Need a motion for adjournment?
Okay, no, you got a closed session, okay?
I promise.
Adam says 5 minutes. This will be for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose where the discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to section 2.23711A3 of the Code of Virginia.
So moved.
Okay, so moved.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlynn?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
All right, we are in closed session. ask for a motion to certify that only the items discussed.
There you go, right.
Okay. We're back in session. I'll ask for a motion to certify that only items discussed were those identified in the previous motion.
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Stevens?
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisner?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. We are now ready for a motion for adjournment until 10 a.m. on January 31st for 2019 for VACO Government Day at the State Capitol.
So moved.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Larson? Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
She's still
Mr.
struggling.
Eisenhower?
Aye. I'm about to call. We are adjourned.